All right. In the process of researching an esoteric angle originating from the Fontana, California area, which I discovered while during my research on the Zodiac crimes, which I would encourage you to go back and look at those clips if you're unfamiliar. But basically, I've been following some research involving esoteric angles and occult activity, and that led me to the Fontana area, where actually I have quite a bit of family who have roots there, and so I know a little bit more than average about most people about some of the local things that are going on there, even though I didn't really ever live there or anything. But I visited enough and things like that to kind of know things about it. And one of the things that I noticed was kind of interesting is that Fontana Road, a major thoroughfare, has kind of been there for a long time. It runs through the middle of town at precisely 44.66 degrees. If you get out your Google Earth tool and draw an angle, you'll notice it follows at 44.66, which is pretty specific. But the reason why I think it's actually at 66, and that's not just a whatever you want to call it, a miscalculation, is because not only does it follow Fontana Road, but it actually crosses Route 66 on its way out of Fontana and San Bernardino County area. So and then it continues on and crosses over like Twin Peaks, Lake Arrowhead area, and then continues on towards Primm, Nevada. And so as I was following that 44.66 degree line, and it took me out to Primm, Nevada, I couldn't help but notice the solar array that's out there. And it's kind of a unique setup. And when you zoom in on it, you'll notice it has some pretty unique features. It kind of looks like three circles, and they have a whole series of solar arrays that go around it. And as you zoom in, you can kind of really see what's kind of going on out there. But the reason why this piqued my curiosity is just because I think in terms of like how a communications engineer does. I think in terms of how would something work if this was something other than a solar array, for example. So I just kind of had an intuition that there's a tunnel network that extends between that area of San Bernardino County and continues along where Fontana is and heads out towards Nevada, crossing through Las Vegas and the Henderson area. And what makes me think that is that I've just found too many markers and things like that out there that kind of indicate tunnels and underground facilities. And then as I kind of traced the suspected routes of those into this area, where it seems almost like it works almost like a communication network, where there's pipelines that go into like a main line and then head out towards Primm. So I'm thinking maybe that's what's going on, and then I'll get into a decrypt on Primm. There's a whole bunch of things going out there. I'm going to have to split this up into a few different presentations, but just kind of consider this more of a broad overview as to what I think might be going on here. It just seems to me like there's a possible bioenergetic system, just because I followed the research of Wilhelm Reich, and I've studied these things a little bit myself, and have seen just examples of bioenergetics at work, to where I'm at. I need to find more test equipment and be in a more lab oriented environment before I can really tell you what I completely believe about bioenergetics and orgone. But I think that what might be going on out here is that you're dealing with energetics at a POR and DOR spectrum. And I'm just going to read this over really quick, the research of Wilhelm Reich, to give you a quick idea of what I'm talking about here. And before I get into the patterns too. So, but basically, it says, with further research, Wilhelm Reich found that orgone energy is responsible for storms and bad weather. Dead orgone, or DOR, was the term used to describe the dead energy found within violent thunderstorms and hurricanes. This dead energy was also found within people as well. Active people had plenty of orgone energy, while those who were depressed or sullen had an excess of DOR energy. And so there's some slides that I can show you where when POR is emanating from the body, it externalizes. So the signal, like bioenergetically, releases from the core of the body, the center of your chakra system, and outward. And it's a positive release. When a person's stressed or in fear or in an anxiety state, that it's the opposite. DOR causes the muscles to contract, and you go inward. So your energy is actually going in on itself, as opposed to emanating. So Reich is said to have been a brilliant man, credited with discovering the highly controversial orgone energy. Orgone energy is also known as life or orgasmic energy, and is very different from more ordinary electromagnetic energy. Reich supposedly provided the existence of orgone energy in various lab experiments and wrote his findings in several scientific journals. He claimed that orgone energy could cure cancer, a finding that didn't find wide acceptance with his colleagues. Reich also stated that orgone energy has related to cosmic energy and the Newtonian concept of the ether. Needless to say, his theories were widely criticized by his fellow scientists. After extensive research, Reich finally developed a device that would break up concentrations of DOR energy. When set up with a weather balloon, this device would dissipate or deflect thunderstorms. Armed with Reich's Stormbuster, the U.S. government created a device called a Radiosonde. The device consisted of several sensors and a transmitter that could broadcast across several bands to either build up orgone energy or disrupt DOR energy. With it, the government could control the weather. It should be pointed out that any device capable of transmitting both orgone and DOR energy could be used to affect people as well. It is possible that the Phoenix Project was also looking into methods of population control. Supposedly, the Soviet Union had conducted extensive experiments on select populations by broadcasting orgone or DOR energy into the area to try and alter the emotional content of the population. So, this got me thinking in terms of the Giza Pyramids and what they might have been as far as in tandem with the research of Wilhelm Reich, that perhaps what he was really doing with bioenergetics was just tapping into the technology that was being used by the Egyptians in the pyramids. By that I mean when you kind of look at the structure of pyramids and the granite and everything that's in there, it's kind of reflective like waveguide. And so in telecommunications, waveguide is like these systems of, where there's materials inside it to where the signal can kind of have it follows a certain designed path, right, as far as the way the signal behavior acts. And it just sends the signal through this, the microwave area here, right? So I don't want to get too deep into the technicals of it, but just think of it more as like a tunnel system where the energy passes through, and that's how microwave works. And just like when you're doing path-to-path communications to where one dish points to the other dish and they can talk to one another, and also when you don't have another dish on the other side, it just fries it. It's kind of a similar concept, right? One dish, you're just pointing at something to cook it. If it's two dishes that are point to point, they're trying to communicate to one another. So what I think might be going on potentially, just as a broad overview here, is that there might be a tunnel system that connects areas of Southern California into Primm, and that part of their design is specifically to transmit orgone at the DOR spectrum, which is bioenergetics, and that they're really just potentially borrowing from all of the designs of the Giza Pyramids and what their true intention was. Because I've had a long intuition, I'm sure a lot of other people have, and mind you, none of this is original ideas here. I'm just telling you that a lot of people have speculated that the King's and Queen's chambers weren't necessarily places where people stayed or slept or were buried, but they were energy devices. And I think there might be something to that. Especially when you start studying the concept of what Wilhelm Reich was talking about a little bit more in depth, involving that effectively POR is sort of life energy or orgasmic energy. So when you really get down to it, there might have been the whole purpose behind designating king and queen might have been specifically to discuss how the spectrum of orgasm energy operates and how it can be perhaps harnessed and then redirected as a healing mechanism. So when you kind of look at the layout of the pyramids, this kind of lends credibility to this as a theory. And then when you integrate what potentially could be done as far as a weaponized DOR, as far as, just pulling off of anxiety signatures, fear signatures, trauma signatures, and taking that bioenergetic signature and funneling it down through cave systems, which act like, which I'm sure are being redesigned, or if it's happening, right, they're probably have a specific structure to funnel the bioenergetics through there. And to those who doubt this is a real thing, you can probably find online clips where people have actually bottled, and Wilhelm Reich bottled and was able to actually contain this energy, and that it took on the appearance of like a purple light when it was bottled. So he was able to, in his experiments, actually power devices and actually run electronics, you see. So when you add in the concepts of that, you have modern day devices called radiosondes that we have used and that has been acknowledged that the Weather Service uses to pulse megahertz signals into the atmosphere, and I can show you examples of those here. It lends credibility to this as a potential theory, and then when you look, just as a pattern recognition person, when you just kind of study the structure of how these solar arrays have been placed, it's almost like they were mimicking the Giza Pyramids as part of the design, that they are borrowing heavily from it, or just merely creating a replication of what's going on out there in a more modern form using modern materials. So it's something to consider, I think. And there's things that would back this up, as far as like what do you want to call it? There's entertainment that I've noticed that seems to be focused on Primm, Nevada. And I started thinking in terms of like what types of telecommunications would they be providing to go into these types of networks, who would be supporting a project like this, who would be involved in that kind of thing. So I thought it was worth investigating at a bare minimum so that we could, find out what might be going on here in more depth. But I don't want to get too deep into that part right now. I'd rather just focus on, discussing bioenergetics at this level. What are the possibilities? What are some of the methodologies that could be used to transmit bioenergetic signatures and bioenergetic concentrated energies between locations, that type of thing. So again, this is going to be kind of like a part one, and I just wanted to introduce people to the concepts of what I'm talking about here and get some of the thoughts going a little bit, and then I'm going to start discussing more specific, things involving potential connections to entertainment, how Hollywood might have a system through which to communicate things involving Primm, Nevada, and that type of thing. And I'll get into that my next presentation. So I appreciate your time, and thank you.